I'm your host, Jeff Mayhew. I'm here with my co host tonight, Walter Clapp and Roger Scott. Walter, Roger, how are you doing tonight?
Fabulous.
Doing so good. I just got a error message saying that Riverside can't access my video, but can you see me?
I can
I
see
see you.
you. I see
All
you.
right. Well,
So,
I'm doing well. I'm enjoying fall. Um, I'm getting ready to head up to Red Lodge, and just got back from Memphis, and we talked about last week, and yeah, having a good life journey, and excited to hear what you all are up to.
awesome. So, tonight on the show, we were supposed to have a very special guest, James Pethokoukis from AEI. He's the author of The Conservative Futurist. Unfortunately, he was a little under the weather, so we're going to rebook with him. He'll be on the show next week. And kind of just threw some news stories together. It's just going to be us tonight. We're going to talk about Noah Rothram from National Review had an article about the revolutionary mood sweeping through America. And I recently read the book by Robert Mary called Decade of Disunion. I put out a little tweet thread about it, comparing what we went through in the lead up to the Civil War and what we're going through now. So we're going to discuss that. Along with Walter, you listened to the Joe Rogan podcast with Elon Musk, where he talked about apportionment about an hour and 50 into that. So we're going to discuss that as well. And then finally, we're going to get to Walter's favorite topic. We're going to talk a little AI. Marsha Blackburn is going after Google Gemini. So please stay tuned, stay in the episode tonight. But before we get to all of that, let's go around the horn and introduce ourselves. Roger, would you mind going first for tonight?
Yeah, mine, but I'll get over it. I always do. My name's Roger. I'm a North Carolinian, a husband and father, a CPA, and uh, hopeful guitarist. I hope to be a guitarist. That's how I'll put it. I'm enjoying all my learning episodes. Right. For Halloween, I was working on Spooky, learning the song Spooky. It has the word Halloween in the lyrics, so it seemed appropriate.
Eh, are you a Bruce Springsteen fan at all?
Yes?
Did you see his new the biop on him?
No.
No, I went with my son over the weekend. A lot of people are trashing it, but I enjoyed it. So
I have seen and read little bits of about 2 dozen articles about it, so it's getting a lot of press.
it is
But
getting a lot of press.
I'll get around to it sometime when it's available on Netflix or someplace. Is it still in the theaters?
Yeah, it just came out in the theaters. It's just hit.
Yeah,
It's
not a big fan of theaters.
I'm
It's
not
too
either,
expensive.
honestly. Yeah, it cost me. I swear, I took my son out basically for a date. It felt like we went to dinner, we went to the movies, we bought popcorn. I must have spent like $150. I don't know what young men are doing on dates anymore, but it's expensive.
Yeah, what I keep reading says they're not going on dates.
Well, that's true too. All right, Walter, jump in there. Who are you? Where'd you come from? Why? Where's that cat come from? That's a gorgeous cat,
And
by the
where
way.
can I get one of those bitchin' vests?
You're all mute.
My goodness, I pulled a Roger Jeff. um, that was Hawk the cat, because I like irony. And this vest you can pick up at any Murdoch's. This is an Outback vest. And Outback, if you would like to sponsor this podcast live stream, we would love to have you. Murdoch's, same. So if the AI lets you know about this, please come find us. So my name is Walter Clapp. I'm the president. I am a lawyer, originally from Texas. I now reside in Laramie, Wyoming. I practice law here, also all the way up to Montana, across the state there. And I care about all things representation. You know, the way lawyers represent clients, the way CPAs represent clients, doctors, engineers, but also how your elected representatives represent you. You deserve better, and you can demand better and you can do it in a very specific way, which is by seeking the repeal and replacement of the 1929 Permanent Apportionment Act. And that's what we are here to talk about tonight, among other things. And yeah, excited to get into it, Jeff.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. As I mentioned before, I'm your host. My name is Jeff Mayhew. I am a father of 5. I don't come from the political world or academia. I'm a small business owner. My dad is a mechanic. My mom is a banker. And my family's been living in the same place basically since the American Revolution. If you notice, I match Walter tonight. I have a mustache, and that's because on Halloween I dress up as my grandfather, where he always had a mustache.
And because he aspires to be great.
Scott aspires to be great. So, it's funny because my grandfather's really the one that instilled the love of history, which has kind of brought me to this moment. We used to sit in his basement and watch black and white videos of the Korean War with Cronkite, and we'd sit in his kitchen and he'd tell me all about Give 'Em Hell Harry and Damn LBJ and all the stories growing up. So yeah, that's kind of what's brought me here. And I don't have a vest like you guys have a vest, but my dad wears a vest. I don't know if can I be part of the vest club then? You're both on
Oh yeah,
mute.
Roger and I look strikingly similar.
Oh man. So did you guys have a good Halloween? What do you guys do? Roger, your kids are gone. Walter, you don't have any yet. So like, what do you guys do for Halloween if you don't have kids?
Watch Halloween on TV.
My birthday is on November 1st, so it's the day after Halloween. So Halloween's always been a little touch and go for me. Probably a little jealousy, right? A lot of attention on the Halloween. So I'm preparing for All Saints Day on Halloween. Talking to people. We bought some candy, but we kind of live out in the boonies, so we don't have a lot of trick or treaters. In the past, I've been known to don a costume or two, but I've never dressed up as a law enforcement official. Jeff, pretty ballsy decision, I would say.
I was a park ranger. I mean, that's what he was.
That's
That's law enforcement.
Basically.
I've got his park. I've got his park ranger hat. And everything else is just stuff that I buy that was like his. He wore a jean jacket all the time. It's funny when when I was a kid, he would dress up as Union soldiers. He sewed a stripe onto his jeans. And this was right about the time where like there was this fad when I was in middle school or high school where like people actually like there was a brand of jeans that just there was a stripe down the middle, the seam of the jeans. And I originally thought that he was just trying to fit in with the younger crowd. I had like no idea what he was doing. And he was like, "No, it's like a Union soldier," and he's telling me all about it. One of my favorite stories to tell about my grandfather, just to share, like, because it's somewhat relevant today with like some of the radicalism we got going on now. But my parents would have to get to work really early, and he would put me on the bus. I live right down the street from him, and he would pack my lunch for me. And he would tell me all sorts of history, and he'd write a history lesson on my brown paper bag. And we got to World War II, and he put a symbol on my bag that, means something very bad. And he taught me that it means something very bad, and he taught me all about that stuff, but he put it on there just as like the lesson, showing me what it was. And I took it on the bus, and I got immediately sent to the principal's office when I got to school that day, which, is probably the right thing to do with an 11-year-old, but they were impressed that I understood it, and that it wasn't on there in support of. There were other things on the bag as well, right? But my grandfather learned a lesson that day, just like I learned a lesson that day.
And sadly, that lesson has been lost. So many people aren't ashamed to be.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is my Halloween. This is my costume year after year. This is
I
it.
love it.
I love that.
I
I am
think
a
you should wear that on every show.
I
I don't
It's
know
like
about
it's
that.
reminiscent of Abraham Lincoln, but you know,
So the trick is we don't get many trick or treaters here, but we do get a few. So the trick is to have a speaker right in the window, and when they ring the doorbell, I start Toccata and Fugue in D minor by J.S. Bach. You're all familiar with it, the heavy organ piece,
mm-hmm.
as loud as possible, and that opens their eyes, and then they calm down long enough for me to whip the door open real fast, which scares them again, and then I'm standing there in this hat. So it's a roller coaster for them.
Nice. I'm a big Dr. Seuss fan. I do something called the Very Flannel Dino once a month at a local coffee shop. It's a story time for kids, and
Nice.
one of my favorite books to read is The Cat in the Hat and Green Eggs and Ham are two of like the regulars that I get through. It's funny because now I've been doing it for almost 2 years now, and the kids they request those are their favorite ones to read still today. It's still the kids' favorites. So
I can
all
still
right,
recite the first couple of pages of Cat in the Hat, and it's been 30 years since I looked at that book.
yeah, yeah. My
it's
daughter,
pretty cool.
she's like memorized Green Eggs and Ham because I've read it so much to her. Even before she could read, she knew the words to Green Eggs and Ham.
Oh yeah. I would try to figure out if Madison was asleep or not when I was reading her stories. I'd slip in some Cat in the Hat in the middle of Cinderella or whatever other book I was reading, and she would catch it every time.
Clever, I like it. All right, guys, let's jump into the show tonight. Okay, so I mentioned Noah Rothman has a new article he writes for National Review, and it talks about the revolutionary spirit cascading through America. So I was just curious, obviously this is something that we talk about a lot on the show is the polarization that we're going through. What are your thoughts about that? And how do you think uncapping the House will help? And before I get your answer, let me just read a little bit of this. So just the opening paragraph here. On the outset of 2024, Americans were grim. Heading into the presidential election year, a CBS News survey in January found that only a bare majority, 51%, expected the transfer of power from one party to the other to be a peaceful affair. 49% thought the year would end in violence. He also references several other statistics, basically showing that younger Americans and many people in the country just don't have a lot of hope. They think things are going in a negative direction. There's this revolutionary mindset among the youth, and I don't know, could be bad. What do you guys think?
I mean,
You're
I'm
on.
definitely seeing it, and I think you see people being radicalized. That's for sure, to the far left and the far right, and it does seem more difficult to talk to people. I have a cousin who legitimately refuses to speak to me because he believes that I'm a Nazi because I had any sort of emotion about Charlie Kirk being assassinated. Right? Like that's a pretty insane statement, and yet it's true. And on the other side, I know people who have lost friendships over Donald Trump. Um, I, there just is no question that division is running at all-time highs, and the ability for people to speak about these problems is deteriorating. And I think part of this, we talked about Mary Harrington last week, and one of the things she talks about is the erosion of basically reading books, and that's why I think, Jeff, you're big on reading books. My view is that uncapping the House, it is going to reopen education channels, education pathways for people, for the populace, to turn back to long form content for things that genuinely are fact finding in nature. And it's going to be, I think, a tough and tumultuous time to get there. But I do see uncapping the House as it's the necessary precursor to get through this in the least violent way possible. I mean, let's just be honest here, right? Like, there is already violence, right? We can't deny that. And so how do we reduce that? How do we continue to push people towards the solution, a clear solution, which is repealing and replacing the 1929 Permanent Apportionment Act, a simple bill, not a constitutional amendment, something pretty small, and start restoring a model of education where we can have cohesive and coherent facts that cut across the political spectrums. So that's how I tie it together.
Yeah, that echoes the sentiments in that piece echo something that I used to tweet when I first got involved with this idea and was trying to get my message out there. One of the things I tweeted about was how any system you can think of in the universe will fail under excessive pressure, and that's where we are. Our federal government is under excessive pressure for a variety of reasons, including the Permanent Reapportionment Act of 1929. And so if we don't want the system to fail, we need to address the pressure, and Uncap the House is the pressure release valve. It's just a question of how much pressure we release. Enough to hit the Wyoming rule, Wyoming ×2 rule, Cube Root rule. There's a lot of pressure. I don't think we can release it all. Probably wouldn't be a good thing to release it all. There should always be some pressure pushing up to keep things moving along, keep people honest. But, it's like most things in life. There's a trade-off, right? You got to find the right balance, and we are way the hell out of balance right now. And I would argue that at least part of the reason we're out of balance is because the Constitution is out of balance. Jeff and I have talked about this before. When people use the phrase checks and balances, average Americans, they're usually only thinking about the checks, right? The three branches check each other. But then I say, what are the balances? And they have no clue. The federal government's interest, the state government's interest, and the people. The federal government's interest has not been negatively impacted by the Reapportionment Act of 1929. The state's interests have not been negatively affected by the Reapportionment Act of 1929. Only the people. And that's why the Constitution is so far out of balance, because the people's house hasn't grown. So I agree with, what's his name, Noah? I agree with Noah. We need to relieve the pressure, and one of the most effective and quickest ways to do that is simple legislation: repeal the 1929 Act and come up with something better.
Well, so I don't think Noah actually thinks that we're going to relieve the pressure. He actually says it's going to get worse before it gets better. But, I think what he's trying to do is kind of point to a problem that, point to this issue that we do need to release the pressure. I don't think, I tweeted out my thing that we need to release the pressure, kind of adding on to what Noah was saying. But he does say in this article, more than half of Americans 18 to 24, 55% agree that the American dream no longer exists. And you talked about, this failure, the system's just kind of failing. Revolutions tend to happen when governments aren't working. If you can, again, think back to the American Revolution, it was about representation. We weren't able to establish our own laws. We weren't able to govern ourselves effectively. These taxes were forced on us. We didn't like it, right? We tried to solve the problem civilly, but it didn't work. Think about this. Think about World War II, right? The reparations and the way that World War I, the end of World War I was handled was direct correlation to leading to World War II, right? The German people, and I think this is similar to kind of what we're talking about here, is the fact that the German people that rallied around Hitler weren't part of World War I. It was a newer generation. They didn't understand it. They were burdened with their father's failures, essentially. And they didn't quite understand it. And that burden turned into hatred when a radical man like Hitler came to power. And I think that is something that we are seeing today, right? There is a lot of failure on our government's part because of the gridlock that has been imposed by the lack of movement in the House, right? Because the body is capped, because power has become concentrated. It's become a game for the parties to win, a couple votes here, a couple votes there. We can't actually get anything through. We're not solving basic problems. We have healthcare issues. We've got cost of living issues. We've got immigration issues. And a generation of Americans have grown up with these problems, listening to our leaders and just going, you guys suck. You guys suck. And, when I first got into this, almost 5 years ago now, people would tell me, you're crazy. It'll never happen. That's too radical. And now I think that my proposal is one of the most moderate proposals out there of uncapping the house. In the article, Noah also says, where is it here? Most distressingly, a majority of poll respondents, 52%, said that to, quote, make life better in America, we need, quote, radical change. Once again, the age divide is stark. Nearly 2/3 of adults aged 24 and younger endorsed radical but specific revisions to the social compact. Majority said that the same among voters in every age bracket, save those over the age of 65. So, I think, for us, and say, who do we need to connect with? We need to connect with those souls, those younger souls that are looking for radical change. We need to reach those people. We need to educate those people. And we need to say, look, don't follow the Groypers and that Fuentes guy and all of his anti-Semitism, right? Follow us, right? We have a pathway to solve the problem that has created all of the things that you don't like. If you actually care about these things, because ultimately all that stuff is going to do is lead us to fighting each other. And we don't want to fight each other. Nobody wants to fight each other, right? Only a handful of people want to do that. And those are the people that are going to profit off the fighting. And guess what? That's not a majority of Americans. So Americans need to come together and rally around something like uncapping the house, something that relieves the pressure. And once we relieve that pressure, we can start to work on those issues, the immigration, the healthcare, the cost of living, all those problems that need to be taken care of. Once we get new people in there and we create some space for them to work, we talked about it on the podcast a few weeks ago with, it was Ezra Klein and Ben Shapiro. They were talking about gridlock and how the traffic's backed up and everybody's taking all these side roads, but now all the side roads are backed up. Well, expand the road, right? We expand the road, we can get moving again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. What do you think is the exact age range, Jeff, that we should be focusing on?
I'd say 16 to 35 is like prime our target market. They're going to be, number one, they're going to be voters for a long period of time. Number two, they're in the prime of their lives. They have a lot of big decisions to make. They're going to be starting families. They're going to be starting businesses. They're going to be starting careers. They have a lot of stuff on their plates. Some of them are already heavily in politics, and others are going to join in their mid-30s as they start families. So I think we need to have a message that reaches all of them, and we need to find a pathway to reach them.
And the message,
no,
the message
I agree
like.
totally. I think the perennial problem is that those people tend not to have money to contribute. And so we need to find old people who agree with the strategy that want to put in money to go talk to the young people.
And the message I like to give is no matter what particular reform you want to see in government, your odds of success improve when we uncap the house. That's the message
Absolutely.
that I tell people. And it's kind of funny, all this talk about revolution and fighting. It reminds me of the old little scene from the Young Frankenstein or Young Frankenstein movie. I'm sure you're all familiar with the colonel, the field marshal guy says, a riot is a very ugly thing. And I think it's just about time we had one.
That's Jefferson, right? The tree of liberty must be spilt with the blood of tyrants, I believe is what he said. Something to that effect.
Nourished with the blood of tyrants.
Nourished with the blood of tyrants, yeah. To what you were saying, Walter, with the money thing. I mean, obviously, like this is something that we're dealing with. We're a new organization. We're building a foundation. We need money. Like that's what's going to move the needle. Money, as I tell people, it's a tool, right? Like there's a lot of negativity around money in politics with justifiable reasons, but ultimately you're not going to fix that unless you put money into an organization that has a way to fix it. And again, uncapping the house does work to that means, right? Because not only does it relieve the pressure, if one of your big issues is campaign finance, it relieves the pressure by bringing new people in Congress, but it also makes the district smaller, which negates the factor of money long term, right? So that's a bonus as well. And I think the people that we need to target for the money, I think there's a lot of reformers out there. There's a lot of reform groups. They've been working for a really long period of time. We have had some of them on the show, or from their organizations. We've talked about star voting. We've talked about ranked choice voting. We've talked about the primary solution from Nick Toriano. We talked about the Doom Party Loop from Lee Drutman. We've talked about Yuval Levin. We talked about Patrick Deneen. All of these people, they all have their own organizations out there, and they're funded somewhere. And ultimately, they, I don't want to use the word failed, but they're not getting the momentum they need to make the change, right? And the one topic that is coming up repeatedly over and over again is representation and apportionment. And we're going to talk about it a little bit more on the show as we get to our other questions. And it's not going to go away. And so I think, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, right? At some point you got to cut bait with your reform, or you need to roll it into a different reform. And I think that this is the reform that it needs to be rolled into, as well as Roger said. If you actually want to be successful in that, uncapping the House first gives you a better shot. So fund an organization like us, fund some new blood, right? A new face, a little bit more energy, right, to capture and bring some messaging to that group, which, by the way, we're, at least Roger and I, or not Roger, but Walter and I are a little bit closer to that age group than, some of the older reformers, right? Because they've been doing this since the early 90s, and I won't say any names here, but I had a meeting with somebody that runs a reform group, and it was a really good meeting. It was really great information, and I got the impression that he kind of felt this way too. He just mentioned, I think we just need something new out there. And he's like, I think it's good that you're starting something new. And so, I think it's just making those connections. There are people out there that are older that want to support reform. We just have to meet them and move the needle that way. And then we can meet those other younger people and encourage them to interact and vote.
Absolutely. And I think, again, if any of those people are listening, our model is simple, right? Don't focus on the problems, focus on one singular solution. Repeal and replace the 1929 Permanent Apportionment Act. And actually, today I'm renaming it the 1929 Apportionment Act. We will never again say the word permanent on the show, because that is what it is not.
I'm happy with that. I've wrestled with that since I discovered it, whatever, 10 years ago. Especially if you're on Twitter and you're limited to a certain number of characters. Permanent takes up a lot of space, so I would leave it out sometimes just for editing for space, right? Apparently that's something that's a problem. Editing content for time.
I mean, that is literally, if you're a writer, that's what you got to do. There's always space, and you have to figure out how much space you have to communicate your message, and then you have to be able to make it fit. And if you can't make it fit, then you can't communicate. Right, and you got to work with the time or the space that you got.
If I'd had more time,
I was making a snarky reference to 60 Minutes.
Oh! I didn't get it. I'm sorry.
There you go. So I need to work on my snark. I get it. Okay.
I didn't watch that whole thing yet, but I heard about it. I'll have to go back and watch it.
I have not seen this either. What are we talking about? Give me and the viewers.
All right. So Trump sued CBS because they edited Kamala Harris's interview way back when. They paid him $15 million. Now he's done an interview. They taped 73 minutes and broadcast 28. What's up with that? His shit was edited. I think we should all sue CBS, and we should all get $15 million from CBS because of this.
Well, wait, but was it edited? Because I think his allegation was that it was like spliced, right? It was not. It was not that they just like cut off the beginning and end.
Bullshit. He slices and dices and tries to get away with this bullshit time and time again. He sued because the thing was edited.
You don't think the media's ever ingratuitously edited a television appearance of a presidential candidate?
I didn't say that, and that's not the point of what I'm saying. I'm saying is he got 15 million because he called out a specific thing, and now he's turned around and the same damn thing's gone. He's, whatever. I'm the president. I can get away with whatever the hell I want. It makes
I
Rob
mean,
Walker what?
I'm
Sorry,
pretty
not
sure.
sorry.
I'm sorry, Roger, but I'm pretty sure that's like Article 1A of the Constitution is I'm the president and I can do whatever I want. Am I not wrong on that one?
Yeah, it's not the way I read it.
It,
No,
it
I'm
is.
obviously
We
kidding.
just had. I think previously we had this thing called a Congress to rein in the president using
Ah.
their ability to rein in the spending power of the president. But this Congress is spineless. Can't even show up to do a job. So we're not
Executive
getting anything
Assistant
like that.
Mike Johnson. What a leader
Yeah.
that
There
guy
you go.
is. What a leader that guy is. All right, so let's roll right into
Civil
the
War?
next one. Let's roll right into the next one because it's funny because well, I'll get to it. So in the book Decade of Disunion, hold on, where is it? Right here. This is fantastic, by the way. If you haven't read it, you should pick it up. It's by Robert W. Mary. He talks about the lead up to the Civil War and the decade leading up to it. And in a tweet thread today, I tweeted out the similarities between the 1840, the antebellum period leading up to the Civil War, and kind of what we've been going through. And so my question, well, I'll go through my tweet thread here. I'll read the question first, but how do we avoid the Calhoun, Clay, Douglas, and Webster mistakes? And what can we learn from Lincoln and the Republican Party? So let me pull up this thread here. All right, so first, one, there was an imbalance of representation in the House that led to a minority faction advancing the interest of the minority over the interest of the majority. In the early republic, it was the 3/5 compromise, which gave Southern states additional representation. Today, the Permanent Apportionment Act, which you just mentioned, of 1929, the Apportionment Act of 1929, in combination with the lack of proper naturalization procedures for immigrants, has skewed the representation ratio. Essentially, the issue back then was slavery. The issue now is immigration. Number two, radical factions took control of the political parties. The Southern Fire Eaters took over the Democratic Party. The Whig Party was destroyed or went away. And abolitionists formed the new parties. And I want to explain a little bit here. People might hear abolitionists and say, well, they were radicals. They wanted to abolish slavery. That's a good thing. And I agree. That is a good thing. However, there were abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison who wanted to destroy the Constitution. He believed that it was a slave document and it needed to go away. Other abolitionists like Franklin Douglas disagreed with him. They believed that the Republic was about freedom and that they could solve it a different way. So today we see progressives, mainly the Squad. Now, Roger took a little, may disagree here a little bit, which is fine, that have taken control. And when I say taking control, I mean they use their minority power in Congress to move policy to the left. And the Tea Party and the MAGA factions have basically taken over the Republican Party. Number three, a rise in political violence. In the decade of disunion leading up to the Civil War, we had John Brown and his militia bleeding Kansas and the caning of Charles Sumner. There was other instances as well, but just keeping it short. Today, we've seen 2 assassination attempts of President Trump and the assassination of Charlie Kirk, not to mention the hateful rhetoric by Jay Jones, who seemed to believe the only way to move policy is through violent pain. Again, Roger would point out there is other hateful rhetoric out there as well, and I kind of mentioned it earlier with the Groypers and the nonsense that they're spouting out as well. So it's coming from all sides of the political spectrum, not just one side. Number 4, political parties gerrymander for power. In the lead up to the Civil War, the Democrats wiped out the voice of the Whig Party in Virginia, while in Tennessee, the Whigs did the same to the Democrats. This happened in multiple states. Today, we see states like Texas, California, and Virginia are redistricting mid-decade to secure their party's influence in the House of Representatives. Number 5, failure to elect a Speaker of the House. The vote to elect Speaker of the House was deadlocked for the first time in history in 1849 and then again in 1855. And this is where our good friend, executive assistant Mike Johnson comes into play. Because recently, the speaker's vote has been deadlocked in both 2023 and 2025. And that is how Mike Johnson got the speakership. Mike Johnson was a compromise candidate. He was not the leader that either party wanted. And I think it shows leadership. One thing that wasn't on this list that I thought about afterwards is you can actually compare the Compromise of 1850 trying to deal with the problem of slavery to the failure of the Gang of Eight to write immigration reform. Because ultimately, again, if those were the two defining issues, because both of those issues affect representation, and if we go back to the Federalist Papers, if we go back to Madison, he says that this is one of the most pressing issues, not in those exact words, but one of the most pressing issues that your republic depends on is a balanced representation ratio. It is something that each generation must take seriously and take into account. It was off because of slavery. It's been off because of immigration. And in both circumstances, I think that our legislatures failed. And if you look at both circumstances, look at who the legislatures were. The Compromise of 1850, they were an older generation: Clay, Calhoun, Webster, and it was McCain. I think Graham was for the Gang of Eight. I'd have to do a little bit more reading on the Gang of Eight before I can speak too eloquently on that. But it's still an older generation trying to solve a problem that's been long-standing that just hasn't been able to be solved. And then you can also compare the Fugitive Slave Act and the way that it was used. Yes, it was used. It was supposed to be a compromise to kind of, stem the pressure of the divide. But ultimately what happened is it was used to just abduct freemen of the North back down to South in slavery. And if we look at the way that the Trump administration is using ICE, yes, the idea is to remove illegals who are here illegally. However, they're also arresting American citizens and detaining them and causing a lot of ruckus on the street for absolutely no reason. So I think you can compare those two instances as well. So
the other thing I think we have to add context here is, the 1920 amendment, the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to the vote, as well as the Civil Rights Acts that came shortly thereafter, because there's been a continuation of this suppression of representation, right? These people were enfranchised, they were given the right to vote, but they didn't actually get any representation in the House of Representatives. They just had to suddenly share their vote with everyone that was already there in the first place. So I think that it's important for us to think about that, especially as we're reaching out to the young folks, right? I think young women and people of color, people who've been historically disenfranchised, descendants of slaves specifically, are amongst those who are kind of like key in this battle. Sorry, Jeff, to interrupt, but
that's fine. So what happened and how did we stay together? Obviously, we went to war back in in 1860, right? And that was not good for anybody. But how did we survive that war? And then how did we move forward as a country afterwards? So the Republican Party, as I mentioned, the Whig Party was kind of disbanded. There were multiple parties that were formed. And ultimately, the Republican Party was created as a big tent. It welcomed everyone in who wanted to preserve the Union. Okay. And when the Southern fire eaters took control in South Carolina and they seceded, there were Democrats who stayed with the North, right? Because they wanted to preserve the Union. Lincoln was able to rise to power. It's kind of lost in history now, but Lincoln was a moderating voice, not a radical. Lots of people like to put him as a radical, but he was not a radical at the time in comparison to the other people in the party. He did not want to abolish slavery immediately. He wanted to let it be where it was and find a way, thinking that it was going to die a slow death. He also embraced other types of solutions to the problem. He was kind of open-minded about it. His goal was to preserve the Union. But by doing this, creating the big tent, it displaced radical power. And the moderate voice of Lincoln was able to lead the party and the country through the Civil War. After the Civil War, Congress passed the Civil Rights Amendments, which balanced representation and guaranteed rights and citizenship to the freedmen. So how does that play today? So we have an imbalance of representation. We need to solve these problems. We need to relieve the pressure. If we expand our tent, if we extend our tent, we create a big tent of all the reformers in, right? We can displace radical power. We can lift up moderating voices that can lead us through this change that we need to go through. And as Walter mentioned, since the cap, all the people that have been added to the voter rolls, they haven't actually gotten that representation that they were guaranteed. Ultimately, that is your right. Your right is representation. Your right to vote is only as good as the power of the vote. And every year population is added and the Congress, the House of Representatives stays the same, your vote is diluted. You get less and less powerful as a citizen.
Also added 2 states. Did not
That's
increase
right.
representation. Well, we did briefly for a few months in 1959, but
That's true.
overall we haven't added any for the new states either.
Mm-hmm. So, I know that's a long history lesson there, and I apologize for all of that. But, so what can we do? Like, what can we do as citizens? What can we do at No Cap Fund to try to avoid a decade of disunion?
I mean, you got to use this talking point this Thanksgiving. Each of these holidays where you get together with your family and friends, talk about it with them, share our content, put them in touch with us, get them to give you a donation. If you don't want a Christmas gift this year because you're fed up with it all, feel free to send that over to us, and we will put it to good use. And if you want to volunteer, come join us. And we need all the help we can get. Your time and your treasure are both will not go unnoticed. And it is just so clear that if we're going to solve the polarization issue, if we're going to avoid a civil war, it will be through uncapping the House. I feel firmly about that.
Absolutely.
Right? Like either we uncap the House or probably, the pressure is going to continue to build and bad things are going to continue to happen. Maybe there's some way for us to skate out of it, but those seem to kind of be tyrannical in nature, or it would be like some sort of global conflict. But, domestically, it does not seem like we get through the age of AI, which, again, we'll get to at the end of the show, without uncapping the House. We can't operate with 2 different sets of facts for the next 20 years. We have to reconcile that somehow.
And something that I say again and again is, we can make the changes now. We can start the process and manage the change, or we can ignore it and wait for a collapse or a failure or some sort of catastrophic event, and then the changes will manage us. We won't have any choice in the matter at that point. The events of history will overtake us.
But it may get worse before it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the unfortunate thing is it may continue to get worse before it gets better. Right? We could see a situation where, we're not in a civil war, but, Trump cancels the midterm elections, right? Or something crazy like that, where, there's a building pressure that finally breaks his stranglehold on the Congress. I'm hopeful that he's going to do the right thing. I remain prayerful and hopeful that it is possible that bad men do good things, and George Washington is above his fireplace, and he could get us out of this mess in a hot minute. And there's nobody else in the world that could do that singularly, other than him and his executive
Mike Johnson
assistant,
could.
Mike
Johnson could. Mike Johnson
Right.
actually, in my opinion, has more power to get us out of this mess than Donald Trump has. And I'd say Mike Johnson doesn't understand how to use power because he was not supposed to be the guy to get the power. He only has it because the system is broken, and that's it's deadlocked.
Nobody wants him to use it. None of the people who voted for him want him to use it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that it got deadlocked, and
Mhm.
that power is actually Donald Trump's right now, because
Yeah.
Mike Johnson doesn't have, I don't know, I'll just say it, he doesn't have a spine, right? Like, I mean, he's letting Donald Trump, I mean, Donald Trump, he's a puppet, man. Which is funny because a lot of people call Donald Trump a puppet, but he's the one
Yeah.
going around behind the scenes saying how he's humiliating Mike Johnson, and he's happy about it. And Mike Johnson's still out there, playing defense. And I mean, Massey is convinced that the entire recess of the House is just to protect Donald Trump from the Epstein files getting out.
Massey knows more than I do,
is-
so I won't dispute it.
Is Mike Johnson? Is he from Shreveport? What do we know?
Yeah,
about Mike
that's his
Johnson?
district. His district includes Shreveport.
Okay. I know some Shreveport people. We're gonna dig a little deeper into Mike Johnson in the next couple weeks.
I would say that if Mike Johnson does want to be great and he wants to not be humiliated by Donald J. Trump, hire me. I'll solve your problem for you. Like, put me on your staff and I will absolutely help you fix this problem. I don't think he will be calling me though. Because typically people without a spine don't like to be criticized either. So, I mean,
Well, but also, I mean, there's the same long-standing critique that most of us have had over this whole process. It's not just Mike Johnson. Any member of Congress has a disincentive to try and uncap the House. It's going to reduce it's going to reduce the chaos and the polarization, so they won't have as much opportunity to fight for their side and raise money. They won't be able to raise as much money, raise their profile, all those other reasons
listen-
too.
I just went to his website. The November 3rd press release is titled Speaker Johnson on day 34 of the Democrat shutdown, despite 14 consecutive votes to keep government closed, Democrats continue gaslighting the American people. Did you hear that, America? You're being gaslit, but it's not by Mike Johnson.
I don't know. He should hire one of my kids to write for him because that was terrible.
Oh, Mike, you genuinely do have the opportunity to save America. You could do it.
Well, but you say disincentivize, right? Like, there is incentive here. Like, see, the thing with rich and powerful people the thing they want more than anything is to be remembered. Okay, they want to be remembered, and you know who gets remembered? The George Washingtons, the Teddy
Yeah.
Roosevelts,
Well, that's
the
why I
Abraham
think Trump's
Lincolns,
gonna do
the
it.
ones
I
that
think-
actually make real change and make people's lives better, not the ones that are playing the partisan games. Few people remember who Stephen Douglas. You may know his name, but you don't know who Stephen Douglas is. You know who Abraham Lincoln was. You know who Benjamin Franklin was. You know who George Washington was. They are all people who fought for representation. They united for representation. That is what America is. There's all this talk about what is America? What does it mean to be an American? America is about representation. And if you are talking about anything else that is not representation, you don't understand what it is to be an American. I challenge you to pick up a history book and study and understand what it is to be in this great country that gives each individual citizen the power of self-government to write the rules, to be part of the solution and not just be yelling and screaming about the problems.
Amen,
Sorry.
brother.
Sorry.
Love it.
Get a little heated.
Yeah, and that's all well and true. Donald Trump doesn't. He wants to be rich. He wants to be remembered for being the richest person on earth. He doesn't want to be
I don't
a
know.
great statesman. He wants
I'm
to
not
be
so
a rich-
convinced.
I'm not
He
talking
doesn't
about
have
Donald Trump.
Jackson. He doesn't have Jackson over the fireplace. He's got George Washington.
Jackson's
So-
remembered too. And Jackson, look, there's a lot of talk about Jackson, but Jackson had principles and Jackson stood up to Calhoun. Okay. The whole thing, he stood up to Calhoun, who was the leader of the slavery positive good for the country, turning it from a necessary evil into a positive good. And Calhoun is the guy that betrayed his principles when he was working in the administration of, I think it was either Polk or Tyler, when they brought in Texas, right? So like, he put his interest and the party's interest above the country's interest, and Jackson put the country's interest above his own personal interest. Despite, we can disagree on a lot of other things with Jackson, but he still did that thing. And I think that is important, and we should remember that really good thing that he did. Otherwise, the Democratic slaveocracy would have had even more power earlier on during the antebellum period, but it took decades for them to get it and to lead us to civil war, which allowed the northern states to build up their economy, their population, which is how we ended up winning the war anyways.
This is amazing. You are a font of wisdom and knowledge. I think these facts, right? And keeping all these facts straight is important, and remembering these stories. And I think it's a good segue into our next story, which is Tesla. Its CEO, Elon Musk, went on Joe Rogan and made a bunch of claims about apportionment. And it turns out some of them were incorrect. Roger, you want to set it up and correct the record? Give us a community note.
Yeah, it was a little just 2 or 3 minute segment where they weren't even really talking about representation. They were talking specifically about apportionment and apportionment's relationship to the census, right? And Elon takes the position that that tourists, any human with a pulse, including tourists, counts in the census. Those people will be counted, and that's part of how the seats get apportioned. That's flatly incorrect. I have language from the Federal Register that says if you don't have a residential address, you don't have a place where you normally sleep in the U.S., you don't get counted. Now, foreign students at a university have a place where they sleep most nights. They get counted. Tourists, people on business trips, that sort of thing, they don't get counted. Elon says any human with a pulse gets counted, and he thinks that's the way the rule's written. So he's flat wrong on that. Then in the same 2 or 3 minute segment, he goes on to correctly identify that there's gerrymandering going on in California, and the reason for the gerrymandering is to try and get more seats for the Democrat Party. But he completely ignores Texas and Florida and my own state, North Carolina, and all these other states that are trying to do this sort of thing. He doesn't even mention it for context. He just goes straight for Democrats are bad. They're trying to do this thing, right? So the 2 or 3 minutes I found not useful. I didn't learn anything, and in fact, it was misleading.
And this is important because Roger is correct. There's a rule, and if the census workers are following the rule, they are not going to be counting illegal immigrants. They are prohibited from doing so. That is what the rule says. And I think just being charitable to Elon Musk, I think maybe his point is, okay, the rule's there, but frankly, anyone is getting counted because these workers are just knocking on doors and asking questions. I frankly think you're probably right, though, Roger. I think actually somebody who says I'm a tourist probably isn't going to be counted. And so it's a dumb point. It's a dumb kind of own goal, Elon, because if you had been correct, right, and said what was actually true, which is actually his main point, right, that illegal immigrants who are here are being counted. And although they don't have the right to vote necessarily, they have the right to be counted in the census, and that creates perverse incentives around immigration legislation. I think that's probably the point he was trying to make, but he was trying to be sensational, and so as a result said something that is flat wrong. I mean, he basically lied about a federal regulation, and I do think that's important for people to realize, and I also agree that he should mention that the gerrymandering problem is obviously on both sides, and that the solution is uncapping the House, Elon.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, so I'll jump.
But
go ahead.
Can I ask one question while we're talking about immigration? Because I'm curious about this just from you two. Prior to the 2024 election, Senator Lankford of Oklahoma was the main author. There were other people involved, and he authored an immigration bill that everybody was pretty excited about. Right? The Republicans had written it. It was giving them a lot of what they wanted. The Democrats were willing to go along. Trump tanked it. Do you know anything about that bill? Do you think that bill would have been at least part of a good solution to get us to the point where we need to be? or was Trump right to tank the thing just because he didn't want the Dems to get a win?
I mean, I never really think it's a great thing to tank legislation so you could win the presidency, especially when you're not in the if you have the power to sway Congress when you're not in an elected office so you can win office. I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think the American people win there. That just proves how inept Mike Johnson is. And how much he needed Donald Trump to be in office to keep his job. And I think, again, the American people lose. As far as the bill, I'll be honest, I haven't read it. So I can't really give you too much a comment. I should read it. I am studying immigration right now, so I will get to it eventually, but I just haven't made it through it there yet.
You're on mute, Walter. Sorry.
Man, second time I pulled a Roger tonight.
All right, I'll take it.
Yeah, on that bill, I think he probably did kill it for political points, and I think that is a dumb reason to kill a bill. I think also the bill does not address the census counting question, which we were just discussing, right? It was more about, a sensible way to reform kind of the border problems. I think there are already laws on the books. I think a big part of the problem is that each administration comes in, and again, we've talked about this on the show, right? But the executive branch basically has unlimited prosecutorial discretion, and so right, you can have the laws on the books, but the executive branch can just decline to enforce those rules and kind of be like, by the way, feel free to spread that word, right? And that's, I think, part of the problem. What I think we must do is we have to remove the incentives so that there's no incentive for any of the political ruling classes to be inviting people to be here illegally or use their prosecutorial discretion to not prosecute, say, like every farm worker who's here illegally. Like, granted, I remember growing up in the 90s working on a rice farm where there was a place where you would just go pick up illegal immigrants, and like that was just like part of the culture, and like the sheriff knew and everyone knows, and it's just like, how is that what incentives created that, right? And I do think it's correct that
the business model, that's cheap labor.
Yes, but why do our politicians keep allowing it to happen?
I can answer that. So I'm gonna back up just a little bit. Let's go back to Elon and what he was saying. What he should have been pointing out was Yvette Clarke. She's the congressional representative in New York 9 in Brooklyn, and she was in an interview. She was talking about absorbing migrants into her district for, quote, "I need more people in my district just for redistricting purposes." Right? So what this reminds me of is where you talked about the incentives, right? The incentives are for the representatives to keep their job. You know who this reminds me of? You remember that guy that ran Tammany Hall, Boss Tweed? So Boss Tweed was a master at this. So let me pull up here real quick. So a final Tammy method of manufacturing votes was to manufacture citizens. And here, McCunn, one of his cohorts, played a leading role. Political parties had for years offered to pay the naturalization fees of immigrants on the eve of important elections so that grateful new voters might cast ballots for their benefactors. In 1868, desperate to elect Hoffman for governor, Tweed cranked up Tammy's naturalization mill to unprecedented levels. McCunn alone naturalized 27,897 immigrants in 1868. And so I guess the point that I'm making here is the incentives encourage you to use immigrants the same way that the incentives encourage the South to use slaves, right? Yeah. These are human beings who deserve rights and representation. And if you're going to be in our country, if you're going to be in America, you deserve a chance to get that stuff. We should not be bringing citizens here. We should not be bringing people here without laws and a process for them to become American citizens. And we should allow states a little bit of power in who comes in their state or not. And I have a plan for this that I have written. It's part of my new Virginia plan for all of the things that need to take place after we uncap the House and we actually get to this. But, you know, you talk about Lankford's bill, it doesn't address the citizenship question on the census. And ultimately, you don't necessarily have to go after the citizenship question. You just have to do your job as a legislature and create a pathway for representation for everybody to come in here into the country. And I think ultimately that's how you solve that problem. And I have it written out. I'll keep it under wraps for now because I'm still working on it as I study immigration a little bit better.
Excellent. Thanks.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a pathway to citizenship for people that want to come here and be productive members of society, and I think there's no questions about that. And I think the drug cartels are able to flourish in the illegality of the current or past immigration system, and so we do need broader changes. And to the extent that those were lost to gain political points, you know, shame on those folks. Let's do better. Let's get an uncapped House and get, you know, some real lasting reform.
Yeah. And, you know, I think it's important to remember that, you know, many of our presidents came from other countries, or at least their family lineage did. JFK specifically, who wrote a book on immigration, you know, categorizing all of the different immigration reforms he passed an immigration reform when he was in president. I think it passed before he died, or it might have passed after he was assassinated. You know, I think his great grandfather came here, you know, so like it's important to note that immigration has been a big reason why America is as strong and powerful as it is today. And you know, there's a lot of talk about restrictive immigration policies and, you know, keeping a lot of people out. And I think that ultimately the reason that happens is because there are no rules. You're allowing so many people in, and it hurts everyone because, you know, similar to during that period of the Gilded Age, like the reason that we had Ellis Island is because many immigrants would come here and they would get taken advantage of, often by other immigrants, right? They would capture them off the boats, they would smuggle them, they would kidnap them, they would take advantage of them. That happens today. You know, you mentioned it with drug cartels, smuggling people into the country, sex trafficking, all that stuff happens because good people have to break the rules to come into the country. And ultimately, because it makes it so hard to come into the country legally. And by creating, you know, a central point with some rules and opportunity for people to come in, I think you solve a lot of those problems. And it's just treating people with dignity and understanding who we are as America and making us stronger, especially with the population decline. You know, this doesn't solve the population problem that America has, but it does, you know, at least helps stem the tide so we can get the younger generation to have some babies, for crying out loud. But they got to believe that tomorrow is going to be, in order for them to have babies though, they have to believe that there's a future. Because ultimately, I think that's why a lot of people don't want to have kids, is they see everything is so broken and they don't have any hope. And everything's so expensive and kids are expensive. So they're like, I don't want to do it.
Well, and we can't agree on
right
basic
now.
facts about climate change, you know, or weather modification, or, you know, like there are these like very, very basic things that until we have a common source of truth, right? A legislature that can say, actually, here's what's going on and here's how we know. You know, we're just going to continue to drift further and further apart, unfortunately.
Well, that segues us. Oh, sorry, but go ahead.
Please. No, I was trying to bring us home. So
all right. So our last question here. AI continues to be a hot topic. Everybody knows it's Walter's favorite thing to talk about, besides the Apportionment Act of 1929. And Marsha Blackburn had accused Google and its AI of targeting conservatives with false allegations and fake news stories, including allegations of a sexual assault that never happened. She wants to shut it down. What type of regulation should we expect with this AI?
There's no regulation that can keep up with it. They're like, to think otherwise is just, that's doomer BS is what I would call it. Like, AI is going to, by its nature, change faster than any law that you can write about it. And so you could try to write a law about it that like captures the general nature of it, but we've already done that, and it's called the Constitution of the United States of America. And so really what we need is a legislature that is able to use AIs to our advantage, right? To create a plurality of artificial intelligences that can cross-check one another so that we can come to a consensus of truth in situations like this. You know, we have long held, the Supreme Court has long held, that the solution to bad speech is more better speech, right? And so how do you get there in a world where everyone is empowered with a supercomputer that can generate an almost unlimited amount of speech? Well, then the source becomes the most important question. Through what human systems or situations, individuals, corporations, do you trust? Can you find trust? And you know, my proposal has long been, we need to have a House of Representatives that is larger than it is now. We need to have AI models trained on the Library of Congress plus the secret stuff, and or two models, one Library of Congress plus the secret stuff. And the individual members can change the weights and measures of these models. So they get to tweak with how the model thinks, but it's operating on the same set of knowledge.
Yep.
And those models should be used to cross-check one another so that they're competing on the weights and measures, but they're using the same base sets of facts. And I genuinely think without something like this, we essentially will wind up like China, where they're going to have a top-down truth-seeking mission, but it's going to be top-down, and so when it doesn't align with the party values, they're going to build in a back door so they can change it.
Right.
And we as Americans, I think, have to be top down averse, right? We are bottom up. We want to source truth between the constituents and their representative members, and that is, it's what we aspired to do in the past. It's what we did do until about the 1920s, and that model has slowly eroded over time. And so AI is just kind of the force function. It's forcing this question of, you know, how do we build truth again when all of these AI models are trying to destroy it? And the answer can never be legislation. A static piece of legislation simply cannot and will not ever address the problems that are presented by Ms. Blackburn. It's more better speech, and speech by people that you trust, right? And so how do we rebuild trusted speakers? And the answer is to uncap the U.S. House of Representatives. I'll let one of y'all jump.
Roger. Roger.
Done.
Well, you know, I've listened to Walter talk about his idea for the individual members having their AI client, let's say, talking client server terms, right? The Library of Congress, the data set is the server. The individual legislature has a client, and they interact with that. And yeah, I've listened to that a couple times, and I'm warming up to the idea. I like it more and more. One of my thoughts, I guess, follow up on that is, can I, as a citizen, have my own client, train on the same set of data that they have? So I am in effect fact checking my representative, which is also being fact checked by the other representatives, but I retain some, at least, feeling of power and control and alignment with my representative. What do you think of that part of the idea?
Yeah, no, I love it. I think that it absolutely should go down to the individuals, and they should be having a model perhaps that they can tweak themselves. And my point here, in part, right, is that this should be something that you're paying for, right? Like if our tax dollars are going to something, it's to finding the truth and helping constituents be better informed about what is actually true. You know, I think it's increasingly clear that right, a lot of things were gotten away with, you know, over the last couple of hundred years of American history, and
Yeah.
Either that is going to continue until you have, you know, a bad situation, or we're going to find a way kind of off ramp that, right, and kind of say, okay, what happened in the past, like that wasn't great, but it was kind of the best we could do. But now we have a new technological breakthrough that allows us to, frankly, just be a more trustworthy society, and potentially, right, that is what AI could allow us, is to become a more trustworthy society. You know, on the other hand, it could just provide totalitarian control to, you know, China if they win, or Palantir if we don't win domestically.
Well,
So,
people will find a way to get away with stuff. I heard a story on NPR. One of the podcasts they do just blew me away. So they have episodes, old NPR podcasts on Spotify. And there's a person, an administrative staff or intern type, that's responsible for 2 or 3 of these shows, managing the comments, responding. And she noticed 20 comments show up in an episode on Spotify that was 3 years old. And she went to investigate, and they were all comments like, "You're so pretty. No, you're so pretty, blah, blah, blah." And then it happened a week later, but it was 90 comments on another show that was 4 years old sitting in Spotify. And it was pretty clear from the exchange that these were kids having a chat. This was like a pop-up special purpose chat room, probably because they're at home and their phone's been taken by their parents, they're grounded, or they're in school and they can only access a limited number of things. They don't have their phone with them. One of the things they can access is Spotify. So they have an agreement with themselves. We'll go to this NPR show. We've come up with a workaround to a technological block that prevents us from having the children will save us all. They will save us all. But my point is, you come up with a technological fix, there is a way around it. And one of the enterprising youngsters in our country will find it.
So
And then one other thing I want to say before I'll shut up. I was reading in response to Jeff, the list of questions that he had sent out for us to think about. I was reading up on AI, the latest sort of thing, and there's a lot of this discussion about whether AI should get personhood or not. I can't believe that's even a discussion. Why would anybody consider that? If an entity cannot be held accountable in court, it cannot be given agency. Just cannot.
So that we're gonna tackle that with James or Jim next week. So, but for this, so I'll say a couple things on this. One, I agree. We got to uncap the house. We need a source of communication that's human based to properly tackle the issue. And while I agree there is no single piece of regulation that's going to solve this problem, I do believe you have to have some regulation. Ultimately, we've always had I'm a father, right? I've got a backyard. I've got young kids. I've got a dog. Did I just let them go out in the backyard and run? No, I put a fence, right? I put a fence to keep them in, to restrain their worst instincts to run away and to protect other things from coming in, right? And I think that, we have to have some sort of boundaries and fences for this AI. We had it with with television when it came out. We've had it with everything. And you mentioned new technologies, and I'm reading that book 1929, and it's not the same type of technology, but buying on margin and was new to the market, and that wild speculation is part of what created the crash. And because it was new and people didn't understand it, bad people took advantage of this and created the mess. And then afterwards we ended up with Glass-Steagall, that created, some sort of boundary and fence to this. So ultimately I think you have to have some of this. I think you have to have a House of Representatives that's properly apportioned, talking with the American people on explaining the issues with AI, the type of regulation that needs to be happening, listening to the people on what they want. It needs to be a bottom-up solution. And what you don't want is what we got after the crash, which was going to JP Morgan and asking one of their CEOs to write the regulation. We don't want Plantar writing the regulation, right? We don't want Facebook writing the regulation. And to your point about the younger generation, I think this is something really, really interesting. They are going to grow up with this, and they're going to be able to spot AI quicker and faster than older people. My wife was watching AI videos and she thought they were real. And my children was like, "No, that's fake, mom." And and I knew it was fake because it has Sora label on it, and she doesn't know what Sora is because she's not into this type of thing. She's just watching it on Facebook. And my kids don't notice the Sora; they just notice the fact that it doesn't look like what they're used to, and they pick up on it really quickly. And as you mentioned, Roger, children will find a way. Anybody that's had kids understands
Yep.
that children are incredibly innovative in solving problems that serve their ends. And I think about it
Yes.
this way too. We grew up. Remember, we grew up and we had, a box TV, and we watched it and we thought, man, this looks great. This is amazing, because before that it was black and white and it wasn't clear and crisp. And then we have this color, awesome TV. And then we moved into the 90s and the 2000s, and we got plasma TVs and HD TVs. And we were like, man, look at that. And now we've got all the streaming services and we watch it on these big crystal projection TVs. And we're like, man, look how clear it is. And we go all the way back. And if you ever watched anything on like a 1990s HD TV or like an old box TV, you're like, how did I ever see that? It's so grainy. It looks so terrible. But in the moment, when it was the new technology, it was the thing that looked amazing, right? But as time ages, as technology grows on, it's easier to see the differences between what's real and what isn't real. And so I think all of the above, uncapping the house, a little bit of regulation that's, communicated with the American people and taken in their voice to create some boundaries and fences. But ultimately, you need freedom for the market to survive, so you can continue to thrive in the technology and get better, so we don't fall behind other countries like China, who are going to have a top-down centralized power. And as I've talked about before, centralized power doesn't work long term, but it can cause a lot of headache in the short term. So we have to make sure that we are, able to compete in the marketplace.
So
So here's-
I'll add. Go ahead, Roger.
Well, there's a question about so with going back to the idea of the Library of Congress being the model. Just thinking out loud here, what if the regulation is AI in the United States uses that model? Or if Library of Congress is not the end all be all, maybe there's three different data sets like that. And those are the models everybody in the US uses. Do whatever the hell you want with them, but that's where your AI has to train. Is that a viable idea?
I mean, so what I actually imagine this being is that there would be a piece of legislation, an enabling legislation, that is funding an AI-based model system that would be developed by the U.S. Congress, and that would train on data from the Library of Congress, and that it would be made available to the members of the House and its constituents for free.
Right.
I think that what I would say on Jeff's point of other fences for the other players in the market, one fence you can imagine, right? Just like the whole TikTok debate, obviously Chinese models, right? You would want to be thinking about your vulnerable population, talking to foreign nationals, right? Or national or models that are whose weights and measures are set by a foreign national or an entity controlled by a foreign national. The other, I think, really big thing is just disclosure, right? So if I was going to support maybe one small regulation federally, I think it would be that if you are incorporating AI into a product, that it basically has to be disclosed in which model it is, right? So that if you are including the open source, Library of Congress model, it's more trustworthy. And if you're incorporating, Grok or Gemini or one of these others that are controlled by a corporation, you understand, that there may be a bias built into the
Right.
model as a
Informed
result of
consent.
its
Yeah,
ownership.
okay, that's good.
Yeah. So I think those would kind of be the two. I think otherwise, I'm very hesitant. I think it's a really bad idea to say, because AI is so dangerous, only these 5 people get to do it, right?
Right.
That for me, one, I think it's just technically incorrect, right? That these models are going to be able to be trained with using less and less power, and you can't regulate that kind of thing, right? Like the genie's kind of out of the box at this point. Llama models, you can already download it and run a Llama model with a relatively modest computer, and in
Right.
another couple years, you're going to be able to run a model on your phone, and so or a hacked together phone, and so
A 3D
the
printed phone.
criminals are the criminals are going to figure out how to do it, and so my philosophy, like the First Amendment, is the point of the First Amendment is to have the criminals speak loudly, or the white supremacists speak loudly, so you know where they are, right?
Right.
And so if you make things illegal, you drive them underground, and then people do really bad things with them. Whereas if you make if you make things a little bit more open source, you just track it all. You track how people are using it, and if somebody gets some really boneheaded ideas and is trying to use it to build bombs, right? That would be discoverable information. So that there are guardrails, but I think the fewer the better, and disclosure is key. But I mean, really, if we want to stop people from building bombs, it's not about hiding the information about how to build a bomb, because then they're just going to go drive a car into a crowd, or whatever stupid thing, right?
Use fertilizer.
They decide
Yeah.
is next.
Mhm.
Yeah, what we need is a society that people want to live in. We need a society where people feel heard and want to keep going, and want to contribute rather than tear it down. And I think one of our biggest problems, like really, is this sense that people just feel helpless and hopeless, and they don't feel like they have a voice. And in an uncapped house, you do have a voice, both as against AI and as against the giant corporations that have been controlling things for a while. So let's get on with it.
I agree, and I think your disclosure. I think the word that comes to mind is transparency. I think with everything, transparency is good. I like the fact that those Sora videos are labeled with Sora on them. I think that if you're going to create AI videos that look like real people doing real things, you should let people know it's not real. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't see how that hurts the market. The market shouldn't be to dupe people into thinking something's real when it's not real. It should be to use that technology for good, not to use it for deceivious purposes. So I think, basic things like that are the type of, small regulations that would be good, and transparency regulations are good, just so people understand what they're dealing with. So that brings us to the end of our show.
I think so. Excellent show.
Final.
I enjoyed this.
Final words.
Oh, nobody's going to start. I hadn't really thought of any final words today. For Thanksgiving this year, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. The sister who normally has all of us at her house, her 2 adult children are going to their spouses' families elsewhere. So we're not having the big get together this year at the water's edge at the shore. So I'm trying to figure out, maybe I'll just go work a place that's serving meals to people who need meals on Thanksgiving.
Ooh, I like that.
And I've never done that. I've thought about it before, but we always had a family thing to do, or the kids were young. So this year, I think I might try to find some way to be of service to someone else.
That's
Yeah,
all.
that's
That's
my
what
final
America's
thought.
about, right there.
Yeah.
Walter.
Nothing to do with uncapping the house. Just want to be of service to somebody because I'm feeling that way right now.
I love it. I it's kind of similar. We're not doing anything big for Thanksgiving. Kind of got family going in some different directions, and so yeah, maybe we're gonna go find a soup kitchen as well, and then I've got some work the following week, so I'm gonna be traveling after the day of. But I keep making great connections with old people and young people. And I remain super hopeful to Uncapped House. And I'm going to be working on it day and night. So if anyone out there wants to get in touch, go to the website. You can see it here, y435.org. And, check out the Declaration of Representation. If you haven't gone, go read that. It's an excellent little document that we put together, and we think it really distills the way that we're feeling. And it would be a good thing to bring, print out some copies and bring them to your Thanksgiving dinner.
It is thought-provoking. It will cause you to think.
Well, and if you're worried about things getting heated, right? If you're worried about that aunt or uncle or mom or dad or sister or brother, whatever, come armed with a great topic, which is the solution to the problem today is representation, in reframing the problem as something that is somewhat conceptual. Helps get it away from the emotion of the individual, mudslinging that is, so pervasive today. Ultimately, all of these people are extremely flawed, operating in an extremely flawed system, and so let's make the system work better, and we'll help people shine a little bit more, and protect against the ambition that is inherent in the heart of every man, woman, and child out there.
Yeah. So what I'll say is for Thanksgiving, I'll be recovering from hip surgery, so I will not be doing anything. I'm getting hip surgery on the 25th, so 2 days before Thanksgiving. But what you could do if you like the podcast, if you really feel passionately about this, you can go to our website, www.y35.org, y435.org, and you can sign up to volunteer, donate, or sign the declaration. What I'll be working on from now until the end of the month is we have a monthly goal of $5,000 for the month of November. I've raised $200 so far, so we got a ways to go. We want to put on a representation summit. I have been booking meetings locally with friends and family, and I'm pitching this here. This is our representation plan. Okay, we got to build a coalition to unite around representation. We've got messaging in here. Part of our plan, we have a commitment to education to help people understand why this issue is so important. Like I mentioned, we want to put on a representation summit next year, 2026. We want to bring together all the reformers and citizens. We want to put them in a room together, replicate what representation is supposed to be, and start a new conversation, one that is less volatile and more solution-oriented. Obviously, that would go to support the representation station here as we continue to reach all those across America and build out a grassroots organization that models the current House structure as we have. And then, of course, we have a legislative plan. We're still tinkering with all this. We're still building it. But, if you're interested, reach out. I'd be happy to go over it with you if you're interested in making a donation. Any little bit helps, $100 here, $50 there. If you want to, want to help us out, we want to be able to raise the $5,000 so we can put the deposits down on our venue for next year. So, if I can get some bigger donors in, I guess as Walter said, I need some older people that have money, but that's what I'm going to be working on for the next month. And if you listened and you're like, that decade of disunion, I don't want to replicate that. I want to make change. I want to do something different. I want to learn from what the past did wrong and what they did right. And what I'm trying to replicate is all the things that we did right in our history. And I've studied it relentlessly. And I focused on the people that found solutions to the problems. And I've tried to build a plan that replicates what they did that led us out of the problems and united us together to grow and become a stronger country. So I thank you very much for all joining us. What do you got there, Walter?
Jeff? Yeah, well, couple things. First is, so next week, next Monday, November 10th, we're going to be having who on the podcast?
James Pethokoukis. So he was supposed to be
Okay.
on tonight. We bumped him to next week. And then on November 17th, we have Laura. I always mispronounce her last name. Hold on. Let me look at it real quick. Borkrum. She is from the We Made This Political podcast, which I was on a few weeks ago.
Awesome. And I don't think we have anyone currently the 24th, the week of Thanksgiving. So maybe we will be doing a Thanksgiving special.
So the
And
20
then
24th,
ahead.
I'm leaving open because I'm having surgery on the 25th. I haven't decided if I'm
Ah.
going to be able to do that. I have my appointment on the 13th, and I will find out the timing for that, and then I'll report back on if we can do a show, if I'm able to do a show that night or not.
Okay, we might have Thanksgiving off. And then on the first, I think, especially Jeff, with you potentially in recovery, I think we'll have a Google meeting, a members meeting,
So-
for folks that want to come.
So hold on. Sorry. I actually, in my email, somebody had just responded back to an invitation, and I have that date booked. I haven't confirmed it, but let's leave that
December
open.
1st.
December for I literally during the show I just like popped over to my email real quick and somebody had emailed me back. So Josh
Okay,
Lewis
well,
from Saving Elephants had confirmed. So
Do you want to? We could do a members meeting / open AMA space on X following that on the 24th. That way we don't need to rely on Riverside. And if you're available, great. And if not, Roger and I will handle it.
yeah, that can work. Let's finalize it and we'll put out some tweets about it just so we can have it on the schedule for
Yeah.
people to follow up on.
Okay. So the last thing is, everyone, dear listener,
Merch.
we have these amazing leather journals. The journal on the inside, it's replaceable, but you have this beautiful embossed, stamped, no cap fund journal. This is made at Range Leather in Laramie, Wyoming. You can see it right there. Thanks to the good folks over at Range Leather. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have about 6 of them that are for sale. And if you're interested, reach out to me. You only get these if you make a donation over a certain limit. You can become a founding partner. So reach out to Jeff and I, and we would love to get you one of these journals. You could literally have this thing for a lifetime. It could be yours, and then your kids, and then perhaps your grandkids. And if you become a founding member, I will sign a note in here, and you can have a handwritten note from yours truly, Walter Clapp. And I will even practice before I make that note so that the script it'll be like a piece of art almost. All right.
I'll come play Pipeline on your front porch.
I think if for the month of November, for the first 6 people that donate $500 or more should get one of those.
All right.
That will
deal.
help. That'll help us get to our goal. And those were not cheap either. There's
No,
something
they're not.
special. There's something
So
special that we bought for a specific reason, and we want to take care of the people that have helped us build this organization. And if you're gonna help us, make that donation, put those deposits down. We want to take care of you too and have something special that you can walk away with. So reach out to us. You can find us at w@nocapfund.org or jeff@nocapfund.org. Reach out, make a donation, and we'll send you one. All right. Well, as always, peace, love, and representation.
Representation. So long, fellers.